Welcome to my channel Naveen Chahat Life Lens. Today we will start our civil services preparation journey with the subject history from basics to advanced. So, we will begin from the class 6 NCERT book of history and I hope you all will like it. Civil services with the subject history. So, first question which arises in everyone's mind is why to study history? As it helps us to understand how this present has been evolved and also tell us about the past of the present. We will start from the NCERT Class 6 History. And the first chapter is what, where, how and when, which means क्या, कहाँ, कैसे और कब. It starts with a question of a girl named Rashida. Her question is like, Rashida sat reading the newspaper. Suddenly her eyes fell on a small headline. 100 years ago. She wondered how, कैसे ये, could anyone know what had happened so many years ago? कैसे किसी को पता चल सकता है कि इतने सालों पहले क्या हुआ था? तो वो सोचती है कि अगर yesterday के बारे में हमको जानना है, वी कैन लिसन टू द रेडियो, वॉच टेलीविजन, रीड द न्यूज़पेपर. अगर पिछले साल लास्ट ईयर के बारे में जानना है तो हम किसी से पूछ सकते हैं जिसको पिछले साल के बारे में कुछ याद होगा. वी कैन आस्क समबडी हु रिमेंबर. बट व्हाट अबाउट लॉन्ग लॉन्ग अगो? सो व्हाट कैन वी नो अबाउट द पास्ट? हम पास्ट में क्या जान सकते हैं? देयर आर सेवरल थिंग्स वी कैन फाइंड आउट. What people ate, kinds of clothes they wore, houses in which they lived. We can find out also about the lives of hunters, herders, farmers, rulers, merchants, priests, craft persons, artists, musicians, and scientists. And even we can find about of the games children played, the stories they heard, plays they saw, and the songs they sang. दिस इज वट वी कैन नो अबाउट द पास्ट. ये सब चीज़ें हम पास्ट के बारे में जान सकते हैं वाया हिस्ट्री. सो वेयर डिड पीपल लिव? लोग कहाँ रहते थे पहले? घर तो थे नहीं, ऐसी कम्युनिटीज तो थी नहीं, तो लोग कहाँ रहते थे? सो फर्स्ट हियर इट इज रिटन, फाइंड द रिवर नर्मदा ऑन मैप 1 पेज 2. लेट्स गो टू द पेज 2 एंड मैप 1. Let's see the river Narmada. Let me highlight it for you. It is here. So river Narmada is here. Now let's read the context. People have lived along the banks of this river for several 100,000 years. लोग यहाँ पे बहुत सालों तक रहे, even for 1,000 years. Some of the earliest people who lived here were skilled gatherers. That is, people who gathered their food. जो अपना खाना खुद गैदर करते थे, ऐसे लोग यहाँ पे रह चुके हैं. और उनको यहाँ के वास्ट वेल्थ ऑफ प्लांट्स इन द सराउंडिंग फॉरेस्ट, कैसे प्लांट्स है सराउंडिंग फॉरेस्ट में, उनका भी पता है. एंड वो अपने फूड के लिए रूट्स कलेक्ट करते थे, फ्रूट्स कलेक्ट करते थे और अदर फॉरेस्ट प्रोड्यूस. They also hunted animals for their food. Now find the Suleiman and Kirtar hills to the northwest. Let me highlight the Suleiman and Kirtar hills in the northwest. They are supposed to be here. Kirtar hills and Suleiman hills. Some of the areas where women and men first began to grow crops such as wheat and barley about 8,000 years ago are located here. So, many women and men which began to grow crops in the early years of 8,000 years ago are from here, and the earlier crops grown were wheat and barley. People also began rearing animals like sheep, goat and cattle and lived in villages. Now next is locate the Garo hills to the northeast and the Vindhyas in central India. Let us see the Garo hills. Garo hills are here in the northeast and Vindhyas in central India. Above Narmada river there are Vindhyas in the central India. These were some of other areas where agriculture developed. Garo hills and Vindhyas are other areas where agriculture was developed. The places where rice was first grown are to the north of the Vindhyas. Now this is important. Places where rice was first grown are to the north of the Vindhyas. Next is trace the river Indus and its tributaries. So let us see where is river Indus. River Indus is here. Let me highlight it. And its tributaries. This Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, Satluj, Byas, all are its tributaries. And now what are tributaries? Tributaries are smaller rivers that flow into a larger river. We can see from here, these are the smaller rivers which are flowing into the larger river of Indus. So its Indus tributaries are Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, Satluj and Byas. About 4,700 years ago, some of the earliest cities flourished on the banks of these rivers. But later, about 2,500 years ago, cities developed on the banks of Ganga and its tributaries and along the sea coast. So now we will locate the Ganga and its tributary called the Son. Let us see the river Ganga now. This is river Ganga and this is its tributary Son river. This is the Son is a smaller river which is going into the Ganga river. In ancient times, the area along these rivers to south of Ganga was known as Magad, now lying in the state of Bihar. Its rulers were very powerful and set up a large kingdom. What is the name of the area? It is Magad, now present in state of Bihar. And its rulers were very powerful and set up a large kingdom. Kingdoms were set up in other parts of the country as well. Throughout, people traveled from one part of subcontinent to another. Hills and high mountains, including Himalayas, deserts, rivers, and seas, make journeys dangerous at times, but never impossible. So men and women moved in search of livelihood, as also to escape from natural disasters like floods and droughts. Sometimes men marched in armies conquering other lands. Besides, merchants traveled with caravans or ships, carrying valuable goods from place to place, and religious teachers walked from village to village, town to town, stopping to offer instruction and advice on the way. Finally, some people perhaps traveled driven by a spirit of adventure, wanting to discover new and exciting places. All this led to the sharing of ideas between people. And by this sharing, we know about the different cultures, different regions, and different agriculture practices, etc. So, why do people travel nowadays? So, we will now look at map 1 once more, where we can see the hills, mountains, and seas form the natural frontiers of the subcontinents. Let me go to the map 1. This is the map 1. Here we can see the Himalaya range. This is the Himalaya range. These are the different rivers. Thar Desert and Kirthar Suleiman Hills, Garo Hills. So hills, mountains and seas are formed the natural frontiers of the subcontinent. While it was difficult to cross these frontiers, those who wanted could and did scale mountains and cross the seas. People from across frontiers also came into subcontinent and settled here. These movements of people enriched our cultural traditions. That means people from different continents, subcontinents came here, and this has been enriched our cultural traditions. And because of this, people have shared new ways of carving stone, composing music, and even cooking food over several hundreds of years. Now, names of the land. Two of the words we often use for our country are India and Bharat. So, the word India comes from Indus. We have seen the Indus River, which is called Sindhu in Sanskrit. The Iranians and Greeks who came to northwest about 2500 years ago were familiar with Indus, or called it Hindos or the Indos, and land to the east of river was called India. And name Bharat was used earlier for a group of people who lived in northwest and who are mentioned in one of the Veds known as Rig Ved. There are four Veds and one of them is Rig Ved. The earliest composition in Sanskrit is in Rigved, about 3500 years ago. Later it was used for the country. So later Bharat name is used for the country. Now next is finding out about the past. How we can find out about the past? There are many ways of finding it. First way is search for and read books that were written long ago, and these books are known as manuscripts because they were written by hand, and in Latin hand means manu or menu, so it's manuscript. They were usually written. Where were they written? They were written on palm leaf or on specially prepared bark of a tree, or on a specially prepared bark of a tree which is known as birch, which is grown in Himalayas. Over the years, many manuscripts were eaten away by insects, some were destroyed, but many have survived, often preserved in temples and monasteries. These books dealt with all kinds of subjects: religious beliefs, practices, lives of kings, medicine, and science. There were epics, poems, plays, and many of these were written in Sanskrit. Others were in Prakrit and Tamil. Prakrit is the language used by ordinary people. We can also study inscriptions. First is the book, all the written documents or written scripts, which is known as manuscripts. Another is inscription. What are inscriptions now? These are writings on relatively hard surfaces such as stone or metal. With relatively hard surfaces writing. And kings got their orders inscribed so that people could see, read, and obey them. And there are other kinds of inscriptions also, where men and women, including kings and queens, recorded what they did. Example, kings often kept records of victories in battle. And we can even see sometimes going to an ancient temple or an ancient museum, and we can see those inscriptions on a hard surface. It may be stone or metal. There were many other things that were made and used in past, and those who study these objects are known as archaeologists. So those who study these objects are known as archaeologists. They study what they study: remains of buildings made of stone and brick, paintings and sculpture. They also explore and dig under the surface of earth to find tools, weapons, pots, pans, ornaments and coins. And some of these objects may be made of stone, bone, baked clay or metal. Objects that are made of hard, imperishable substances usually survive for a long time. So we can see here a pot from an old city. Pots like these were used about 4,700 years ago. You can see this pot. And this is an old silver coin. This is an old silver coin. And these were used from about 2,500 years ago. These both are front. This is the front and this is the back of a silver coin. Archaeologists also look for bones. Whose bones? Of animals, birds, and fish, to find out what people ate in the past. Plant remains survive far more rarely if seeds of grain or pieces of wood have been burnt or survive in a charred form or a charcoal form. Historians, that is scholars who study the past. We can also refer to scholars who study the past. Historians, they are basically historians, often use the word source to refer to the information found from manuscripts, inscriptions, and records. We can even see in our books, in the last page or at the end of a chapter, we can see the source or reference. This is even used by the historians to tell us from where the information they have gained from manuscripts, inscriptions, or from archaeology. Once sources are found, learning about past becomes an adventure as we reconstruct it bit by bit. So, historians and archaeologists are like detectives who use all these sources like clues to find out about our past. So, why our pasts? There is one past or many, but we all know the title of this book is Our Pasts, S in plural, because past was different for different groups of people. Like for herders or farmers, it was different from those of kings and queens. For merchants, it was different from that of craft person and so on. And even today, people follow different practices and customs in different parts of the country. Like most people living in Andaman Island get their own food by fishing, hunting, or forest produce, but in cities depend on others for supplies of food. In cities, we don't go for fishing or hunting or forest produce. We are depending on others for supplying of food. So, like this only, there are different paths for different people, and that's why it is our pasts in plural from PASTS. There is another kind of difference also besides this. There is a great deal about kings and battles they fought because they kept records of their victories. So, generally, ordinary people such as hunters, fishing folk, gatherers, farmers, herders, they did not keep records of what they did. While archaeology helps us find out about their lives, there is much that remains unknown. There is skill that is unknown, but archaeology helped us so that we can know about the lives of ordinary people also. Now, what do dates mean? If somebody asks you a day, you will be probably mention the day, month, and year. Like it's today 14th February 2024. So these years are counted from date generally assigned to birth of Jesus Christ, who is the founder of Christianity. So 2000 means 2000 years after the birth of Christ. All dates before birth of Christ are counted backwards and usually have letters BC added on. In we will refer dates going from back from present using 2000 as our starting point. Now, letters with dates BC we have seen stand for before Christ, and we even see AD, and we will now deal with BC AD in our history. AD means Anno Domini, which means in the year of Lord, in the year of Christ, such as 2012 AD, or we can say 2024 AD. CE can be also used instead of AD. CE can also be used instead of AD, and BCE can be used instead of BC. CE, what does CE mean? Common Era. And what does BCE mean? Before Common Era. CE can be used for AD, which is Anno Domini, and BCE can be used for BC, which is before Christ. So we use these terms because Christian era is now used in most of countries in the world, and in India we began using this form of dating from about 200 years ago. Even sometimes BP is used, which also means before present. We have seen that inscriptions are inscribed on hard surfaces, and many of these inscribed several hundreds of years ago. All inscriptions contain what? Both scripts and languages. Languages which were used as well as scripts which were used have changed over a time. So, it is very difficult for scholars or historians to understand what was inscribed, but there is a process for this. This is done through a process known as decipherment. I will tell you in detail about decipherment. Decipherment means there was a coding language earlier, which was inscribed, and we don't know it now. But now we decipher it, means we will uncode it with our by reading different books about the same or by different sources. We will discuss about this later. So, one of the most famous stories of decipherment comes from Egypt, a country in North Africa where there were kings and queens about 5,000 years ago. Rosetta is a town on the north coast of Egypt, and here an inscribed stone was found, which contained inscriptions in three different languages and scripts. Greek and two forms of Egyptian. Three different languages means one is Greek and two were forms of Egyptian. Scholars who could read Greek figured out that names of kings and queens were enclosed in a little frame called a cartouche, and then they placed the Greek and Egyptian signs side by side and identified the sounds for which the Egyptian letters stood. Lion stood for L, bird for A. Once they knew what letters stood for, they could read other inscriptions also. Like loin stood for L, C, C, same, and bird for A, A. So they deciphered it. How? They placed Greek and Egyptian signs side by side, identified the sound for which Egyptian letters stood, like loin for L, bird for A. And once they know what letter stood for, they could read other inscriptions as well. So this was our first chapter, what, where, how, and when. And these are the some important dates, which are the beginning of agriculture was 8,000 years ago. First citizen Indus, 4,700 years ago. Cities in Ganga Valley, a big kingdom in Magh, now in Bihar, 2,500 years ago. And the present, we will start from 2000 AD or CE, Anno Domini or Common Era. So this is our political map of India with different states in different colors. You can check it or you can else take a screenshot of it also for the reference purpose or source. So this was our first chapter of history of NCERT classics, what, where, how and when. I hope you like it. If you all like my video, then kindly subscribe to my channel Naveen Chahat Lifelines and also like, comment and share. Thank you for watching.